Today we're going to compare 3 games. The Kaito Files, The Man Who Erased His Name, and Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii due to their similarities as releases. And don't you forget to check out my official Patreon to support my channel and get access to early and exclusive bonuses. Donating helps upcoming projects like my Shinada show, which airs here on YouTube in October. Now let's find out which Yakuza Gaiden is the best in the series. I've got 6 categories to analyze in this video. The first 3 involve presentation and cover story, cast, and soundtrack/atmosphere respectively. The second 3 categories are about gameplay, with those being combat, open world activities, and secret bosses. All 6 of these can go hand in hand, but for me, they're a decent way to evaluate the strengths of each Gaiden game. So let's find out. First up with gameplay is going to be category 1, combat. So with all 3 of these games, they're very similar in nature, that being they're a paid spin-off that's cheaper than a mainline title. Each game focuses on a character with 2 fighting styles, and a fresh perspective on a city or 2 that we've already seen before. And you can throw in a few things like, say, filling in the gaps between the bigger mainline games, or simply being an avenue for RGG to both experiment and give some fan service. When it comes to the combat category, it's tough to deduce. There's certainly a lot of ways to approach it. There isn't a Yakuza game I don't have fun playing, and these Gaidens definitely offer a fun way I might add, to goof around with new fighting styles and enemy encounters. Like I said earlier, these Gaidens are a fun way to revisit an established city with a new perspective. The Kaito Files and Kamurocho get the spotlight after being important for only a handful of times, and Lost Judgment's main story. Then The Man Who Erased His Name lets Joryu explore in proper Dragon Engine Sotenbori, along with the quarter of Injicho. Then Pirate Yakuza lets old Goro-Chan explore Honolulu with real-time combat instead of the turn-based type seen in Infinite Wealth. Each of the protagonists gets 2 new fighting styles. Kaito gets the fast and fiery Bruiser style, paired with the bulky, built for utter destruction Tank style. Bruiser's got a nice orange heat aura, while Tank is a brutal purple. Kiryu gets a new agent style from the Daidoji that mixes efficient, flashy takedowns with 4 spy gadgets. Or in other words, got a blast. While Agent gets the classic blue heat aura, Kiryu also gets to unleash his classic Dragon Dojima style that brings back the intense red heat aura for the first time since Yakuza 5, if you don't count Kiwami 1, that is. Of course, Kiryu and Kaito both get the extreme heat mode that's become a staple of the Dragon Engine, where if you hit the right back bumper on your controller, you get a limited time to deal extra damage and use heat moves only usable through this state. I like this mechanic more in Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2 when it was new, but having almost every single Dragon Engine game since then that isn't turn-based use the same extreme heat mechanic to varying degrees of alterations just gets a bit tedious for me personally. I want something different. Then there's Majima's moveset in Pirate Yakuza, where you finally get a Mad Dog fighting style that feels fresh, crazy, and like you're actually playing as a boss character. There's a lot of discourse you can find online breaking down the intricate details to every fighting style I'm discussing today, so I'll just give you my take on Mad Dog. For me, it's fun, full of distinct moves you can pull off, and includes practically every Majima super move from over the years that I wanted to see after seeing them in all of his boss fights. For instance, there's his Demon Fire dash, his spinning blade attack, his knife barrage, his equivalent to the Tiger Drop with that one knife counter has the same move as R1 and triangle. And of course, you get to use his Mad Dog doppelgangers as his extreme heat mode. I like that we got to see an actual unique ability for extreme heat that isn't just a rage mode from the PS3 era of gaming. Now, my biggest complaints of Mad Dog is the fact that there's only one heat bar, and there's still that jank from Dragon Engine games where if you get knocked down by guns or certain melee weapons like, say, spears, it just feels somewhat off. I think it's the combination of the physics and the staggering or stun effects from certain attacks. Now, there's nothing wrong with having these, it just feels way more apparent in almost all these Dragon Engine games since Judgment, and I do prefer the way combat felt more concise and direct when it comes to the games pre-Dragon Engine. Now, I say concise and direct loosely, as of course in Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2 it was still janky with the ragdoll physics and some attacks just not really feel like they're connecting, but I do feel like some of the course correction with the game's judgment just doesn't really mesh as well as I would like it to. And these nitpicks I have do extend to Majima's Sea Dog style as well. Sea Dog is cool, getting a dual-wield swords is always badass, and I like that he gets a legit pirate handgun and a grappling gun. Everybody gets a grappling gun these days. His extreme heat mode consists of 4 dark gods you can summon from musical instruments that remind me of the magic conch shell from SpongeBob. These 4 dark gods are just bigger versions of animals we know, and they're a fun power fantasy once you grind the main pirate side story that is the Devil Flags. And you have to defeat Zeus, of course. What a sentence. However, these instruments of dark destruction are completely missable, and you'll be stuck with the same shark one if you just play the main story. Sea Dog's overall flow is fun, and a cool way to dispatch crowds of enemies, and being able to block from the front and back is a nice feature. And of course, like I said, you get the handgun, the grappling hook, and you can throw Majima's 2 Sea Dog swords, kind of like Ultraman Zero's Ice Luckers. And of course, I like that we get to play as Majima with his beautiful violet purple heat aura as Mad Dog, and Sea Dog has a cool yellow heat aura as well. Nonetheless, when it comes to combat styles of both these Gaidens, and all 3 of them, I usually just stick with one. I prefer Kaito's Bruiser style, Kiryu's Dragon style, and Majima's Mad Dog style over their secondary styles. How many times I have to say styles? No shades on these other styles though. They all have their place. I really enjoy the bizarre enemy variety of Pirate Yakuza, from robots to all the random stuff. Majima's Madness was a decent way to port over Sujimon assets from Yakuza 8 and 7. For the man who raised his name, you had some of those designs appear in the Castle Coliseum, along with a whole host of crazy giant ogre enemies, and a bunch of other weirdos. For the Kaito files, you can spawn difficult boss enemies if you equip a bloody Tojo clan pin, which is a nice touch, especially if you want to earn a bunch of XP early on in Chapter 1, so you can play the rest of the game with most of your upgrades. Yeah, more on that later, different section, but both the Kaito files and the man who erased his name still don't have a New Game Plus feature. I still think that's a real shame, because having New Game Plus on Legend, or Professional, or whatever higher difficulty you want to call it, is always a blast. Having to unlock your second fighting style after a few objectives is one thing, that makes sense. But the removal of New Game Plus still boggles me. Thankfully, Pirate Yakuza kept New Game Plus as a feature. Alright, when it comes to just the combat, from goofing around in the open world to experimenting techniques and boss encounters and swarms of enemies, which Gaiden has the best in my eyes? Well, I'll have to give just combat itself to Pirate Yakuza. Yeah, having only one heat bar as some weird throwback to the original PS2 game is a strange choice, and I wish you could still equip other weapons in your inventory for both Mad Dog and Sea Dog, but I still greatly enjoy just getting the switch between these 2 particular styles on a whim and dealing damage to assholes. Getting to change your outfit in real time is a nice gimmick, but the real meat is the variety of options Majima has when it comes to dispatching swarms of weirdos on the high seas. Even with the jank of the Dragon engine, I had a lot of fun playing as Majima Man. Jumping around in his fighting styles took me back to games from the old days, like The Force Unleashed, or some of those Spider-Man games like Web of Shadows or Shattered Dimensions. And even when some bosses felt like they were getting too close to having the edge over Majima, I felt that Majima's arsenal he comes with gave me enough space to change my tactics and persevere. Even going through those Hitman missions in Honolulu were addicting with Majima's gameplay. So, for combat, I'm giving it the Pirate Yakuza. We're going to dive into the story as the first category for presentation. And spoiler alert, the stories of these 3 games are good. They each have some real high moments that are ingrained in my brain, like Kaito's battle at the Shirakawa house in Chapter 3, Kiryu's arena's battles against the doppelganger trio of fake Watase, Kiryu, and Ryuji in Chapter 2, or Majima saving all of Honolulu like a damn blockbuster against Jack and Keith's army in Chapter 4. There's plenty of other moments I enjoy, besides the obvious great final battles in each of these games. from badass themes to battling their respective penultimate and final bosses, and of course the long battles too. And of course, these Gaidens are a look into their titular characters as they find their place in a world that keeps changing and leaving the Yakuza life in the past. Kaito's story is about him reconciling with his past, and how his devotion to the Matsugane family got between his civilian life with Makiko, and how his past returns to smack him in the face with the reappearance of Makiko and her son June, along with her apparent husband Kiyoya. Kiryu's story is about him dealing with the aftermath of the Song of Life, and his current struggle stuck as a Daidoji agent amidst the gigantic events of Yakuza 7. Majima's story is one about finding rebirth despite being in your upper years, and looking out for the little guys that get pushed around by dumbasses in control. I think each of these stories excel in their own strengths, like Kiryu's having that incredible final chapter that's a big payoff for longtime fans, while Majima's is a nice breath of fresh air, with a tropical pirate journey that is over the top while still hitting home a touching story. However, even with the strengths of getting another spotlight on Kiryu and Majima respectively, I still think that the Kaito Files has the best independent narrative. I don't really need to know much about Kaito beforehand in order to enjoy it. The Kaito Files may only have 4 chapters compared to the 5 in the other 2 Gaidens, but the pacing in the Kaito Files just feels right. The only slow parts are the detective sections, but I think they're less abrasive as the mandatory side content in the other 2 games, or even a game like the original Judgment. Plus, the detective sections in the Kaito Files work well in solving the main story's mysteries, although I can see where they're a bit annoying in repeat playthroughs, for instance. Nonetheless, I think the story of the Kaito Files is my favorite when it comes to a quick story that I enjoy, and one that stands on its own 2 legs. That's not a critique of the main stories of Kiryu and Majima's Gaidens, however, because those still make sense for filling in the gaps between the respective titles they're set between. It makes sense for what they're going for. I just wish the actual pacing of those 2 games were a bit better, and maybe explored a little bit more of the ideas they're tackling. That's all. So for this point in time, I'll give the overall story point to the Kaito Files, even though you do have to have the actual Lost Judgment main game in order to play it. I just think that even as a spin-off for the Kaito Files, it really excels as a self-contained story, and that doesn't diminish the greatness of the other 2 Gaiden games. For the second category in gameplay, we're going to talk about open world activities. Aha! Open world activities, man. They're a core staple of Yakuza's gameplay since they're the core part of the premium adventure experience. It goes hand in hand with the combat after all. Now, these Gaidens come with a smaller scale focus than their mainline contemporaries, while also borrowing assets from them, of course. The Kaito Files doesn't really have any side stories, and Kiryu's Gaiden has a handful of really good ones mixed with the Akame network system. Sadly, the sub-stories in Kiryu's Gaiden are not voice acted, even though it's a smaller game than Yakuza 6. But funny enough, Kaito does appear in Kiryu's Gaiden, and of course Majima as well. Pirate Yakuza has about 30 or so sub-stories in Honolulu, with other events like bonding moments with your crewmates on the ship. To put it short, the Kaito Files only has what you'd expect in modern Kamurocho for things to do. However, it's just things you can just see on the map. It's only things like some Game-Link games, Sega arcades, baseball, and of course, restaurants and shops. At Ibusu Pond, you can purchase extra costumes to wear, but it's only right before the finale, so be sure to create a separate save file. Meanwhile, the man who erased his name and Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii have more what you'd expect in addition to the basic necessities for a likeadragon open world. You got sub-stories, side narratives with the devil flags, and both games even have some form of pocket circuit, whether it's the classic version in Kiryu's spinoff, just plain pocket circuit in Sotenbori, or the dragon cart seen in Majima's game of Honolulu. Both are just reused minigames with a new setting, but they're still fun to get lost in. And of course, both games have their own nightlife pizzazz with some form of the series staple hostess dating, but both instead have these live action segments with the hostesses that take up a bunch of storage, man. However, Kiryu's Gaiden notably feels very empty and lonely with its open world, which fits the tone of the game and carries on with the Song of Life established with its post-story open world. However, something different is felt here, and while at least the castle can provide some company with its plethora of other fighters to play as, even Majima and Kaito, it's hard knowing Kiryu just can't really be himself for now. As I mentioned earlier, this rendition of Sotenbori is fun to navigate, and feels more in line with the renditions in Yakuza 5 and 0, although funnily enough, Gaiden's has that park from 5 appear, while in 7 it just disappears from thin air. It's a funny oversight since 7 and Gaiden take place during the same time. Then when you explore Yokohama as Kiryu, you can tell they were wanting to save the entirety of that city for Kiryu and infinite wealth, since he only gets probably like a sliver of Yokohama here. And I love how this construction just manifests for Kiryu, but disappears for Ichiban in 7. Magical. Then in Pirate Yakuza, you get the benefit of exploring Honolulu with real-time fights this time, allowing some cool little vertical areas to explore with Sea Dog's grappling hook. There's jetpacks on the beach, the plethora of street bosses to fight in a homage to Yakuza 3's Hitman missions, and a lot of freedom to be had of equipping 2 costumes of your choice for Majima. Seeing decades of Majima's history with his costumes is an utter treat for longtime fans. Plus, you get to explore several different archipelagos on these islands when on the Goromaru. You even get some neat winter and volcanic maps if you progress through the Devil Flag sub-story. Not to mention the Madlantis area with a cool Coliseum and an explosive baseball minigame, although I wish there was still an option for Coliseum fights that are just a normal 1v1, no ships involved. One thing I liked about Pirate Yakuza's open world was the camaraderie that came from progressing your bonds with the rich family, Fujita, Saejima, and Manami and Nishida. You can play most minigames with them that are just 2-player, like darts, and you can blast karaoke on your own pirate ship. Suffice to say, I'm giving the open world point to Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Props to RGD for making me fall in love with the city all over again, so quickly after Infinite Wealth. And for the second category in presentation, I'm going to talk about the cast. Ah man, Yakuza games usually always have a fun supporting cast of memorable characters. Sure, sometimes these casts can get really big and hone in on the soap opera elements of having characters come and go, to and fro. And sure, the cast can be uneven for fans sometimes. However, each of these Gaidens did a pretty good job balancing their respective cast of some new side characters to the bosses themselves. Although which game has the cast I remember the most? Well, I'm going to use memorability as a metric in this case, since in the wide pantheon of RGG Yakuza games, there's bound to be casts I connect with more than others. This can boil down to screen time and what they do with said screen time. Pirate Yakuza may have crazier character design since we're in Pirate Land now. Like, you've got Deadbeat Arthur Morgan, Crazy Chef Boyardee, and Samoa Joe. I do like the rich family. I think the highlight is Jason and Noah's dynamic that evolves throughout the story. There's some real heart-wrenching moments between the two. Jason's daughters, however, don't really hit home as much, and the rest of the pirate crew is pretty much just Fujita and random guys until Saejima shows up along with Manami and Ishida. The villains are perfectly fine as mostly pure evil antagonists. I've already done a few videos on them. Then of Kiryu's Gaiden, the supporting cast is mostly either Yakuza with the Watase family, or Cajun clan or Daidoji agents, or Osaka residents like Akame until we get the big Yakuza 7 battle in the final chapter with a bunch of familiar faces. I like Tsuruno. He really feels like he's part of the Watase family and someone Watase himself would trust. Akame's fine as a new florist of Psy interpretation. Hanawa is probably the standout character, though, from that big moment he gets with Kiryu in the middle of the game to the last cutscene of his secret reveal. Shishido is a cool villain, but not one of my favorites, although his boss fight was memorable and a great finale. Shishido is the best boss fight out of the 3 games discussed today. Now, the Kaito Files feels very low-key compared to the other 2, with the game mostly focusing on homage to Kiryu and Haruka, with Kaito's dynamic with June. They're both looking for Mikiko. It's very similar to Yakuza 1, with the birth father being the main villain behind it all, with Kyoto Sadamoto, and there's an actual final battle for another guy, that being Shirakawa, competing for the chick's love. And yet, all of these elements feel fresh with its cast. There's big jobbers like Kimochi and his lackey, Nishio. Then there's some interesting dudes like Iogashi and Senda, who end up helping in the end. The main antagonists being the vile Kira Sadamoto and the surprisingly not evil but more of a final test, Yasutaka Shirakawa, were a distinctively nice twist in retrospect. I'd say the core dynamic of the Kaito Files as well, Kaito and Jun's bond evolving. Same with Pirate Yakuza of Majima and Noah. Then for Kiryu, it's his bond of Hanawa that goes from forced colleagues in a rough job to becoming mutual bros in the end. For the best cast, I have to give it to the Kaito Files though. While Kiryu and Majima spin-offs have far larger stakes and work best as exploring the lore and universe that the bigger titles they've tied to open up, I just really gravitate towards the small-scale nature of the Kaito Files and its respective cast. So for me, I'll give the Kaito Files the best cast point. I may prefer the final boss of the man who erased his name, and the returning old faces seen in Pirate Yakuza, but I'll give the Kaito Files more low-key cast and setting the point. And for the third and last section for gameplay, that's going to be about secret bosses. I'm going to discuss secret bosses since they can be a real highlight and challenge for the post-game premium adventure if you really look for them. Earlier I mentioned how the Kaito Files has a couple difficult secret bosses you can spawn in if you equip the Bloody Tojo Clan pin. And that applies to the final dude with the golden suit and mask. He's like some kind of drunk guy. But this final dude reuses Tesso's moveset from the base game, and has this amazing theme called Neon Sunset that is also played for when Kiryu saves Kaito and the man who erased his name. So, RGG knew it was a banger. While I do like this final bonus challenge for Kaito, there just isn't much to do for his side content since the Kaito file as a whole are mostly a bonus story for you to enjoy. However, Q and Majima do get to fight a new Amon or two. If you know my channel, then you know my History of the Amon Clan video from about 2 years ago. I'll get to the chase here. Taiyo Amon fight in Pirate Yakuza was ridiculously easy on Legend or Professional. I had more trouble in the Coliseum ship battles than Amon's ship fight and actual combat encounter. Like I said earlier, Majima's Mad Dog is just insanely fun to use, and he could pretty much dunk on Taiyo Amon and all his unique, weird sci-fi moves. I didn't even get to fight him myself, I just unlocked him so my younger brothers could fight him, and my jaw was on the floor when the fight ended in like 2 tries for them. Compare that to Kiryu's fights against the Robot Amon army and the aptly named Guy Amon. You probably guessed it, but yeah, I'm giving the secret boss point to the man who erased his name. The 2 Amon battles coupled with unique things like the IF-7 gauntlet throughout the past 6 final bosses for Kiryu with their respective legendary themes playing such a real treat. I have a whole video on that little secret where you can check out right here. And while Guy Amon himself was notably one of the harder Amons we've had in recent years on Professional or Legend difficulty, he's still a fun challenge and not an insanely difficult battle like Yakuza 5 Joe Amon. Still a good fight though, and Guy Amon felt like a proper conclusion to this game's side content, even if the prime side content was mostly the Coliseum. However, I do wish Kiryu's Dragon moveset in this game had a few more of his classic moves and the ability to carry weapons in your inventory. They finally got the gear inventory the 4 slots here. We are so close to greatness with having weapons. And now for the third and last category for presentation, it's going to be soundtrack / atmospheres. So this will be the final point giver for this video. So to round it off, the soundtracks and the respective atmospheres of these games, I grouped them together because they're inseparable for me. From the moment you hit that main menu title screen to the end credits, the soundtracks of these games create the atmosphere that sticks out to you. The Kaito Files has a good soundtrack that builds off Lost Judgment with awesome fighting themes and cool detective ambience, while Pirate Yakuza quite literally screams at you from the start and is full of what I can only describe as a raw kinetic energy transfer into your own soul. With those ideas in mind, we get to the man who erased his name's main menu, which starts off rather mysterious and foreboding, a stark contrast to the Song of Life's more ethereal and longing tone of its menus. Once you play more of the man who erased his name though, the more the soundtrack starts to tell you something else. It's a game hidden with powerful, resounding themes underneath its surface, which reflects Kiryu's own personal turmoil as he's stuck under the facade that's Joryu. Take Agent's fighting theme, which comes across as reserved and quite literally stuck in obedience, while Dragon's fighting theme was a burst of untapped rage that harkens back to the PS2 era. Then you get themes like treachery or un alto espacito, maybe I mispronounced that. Either way, those themes hone in on the unrelenting anger of the Yakuza facing dissolution. If I had to sum up this game's soundtrack, it's this. The fact it starts with an un-Kiryu-like theme with the opening rap song Katatoki, then later, once the end credits hit, with that gut-punching sad rock song fading away, it's brilliant. That sheer difference between the opening and ending is wonderful. That fading away song feels like a deliberate callback to Yakuza 3's Loser, while still being its own beautiful song. So suffice to say, I'm giving the soundtrack an atmosphere point to the man who erased his name. So, in conclusion, here are the results I've created. As you can see, each game somehow ended up each having 2 points for themselves, so it's pretty even. It's not over yet though, because I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. What was I wrong about? What do you think differently? Anything that I missed, huh? Let me know and let's discuss. I'd love to hear your thoughts and analysis. Until next time, I've been Mr. TDF, and consider supporting my official Patreon. I'll see you soon.